When the sun rises in Saudi Arabia in 5 hours' time, Raif Badawi will be flogged with 50 lashes outside a mosque in his home city of Jeddah unless a Saudi prison doctor determines he's not fit to face the punishment owing to injuries sustained in his first flogging of 50 lashes last Friday. If he is deemed fit, he'll be given the remaining 950 lashes tomorrow and over the next 19 weeks. That on top of a 10-year jail term and a hefty fine for the crime of publishing a blog. He was accused in one of his articles on his Free Saudi Liberals site of ridiculing the kingdom's religious police. The US, Britain and other Western governments have called for the punishment to be dropped, but there's been no sign of any serious diplomatic action against Riyadh. Here's Nick Hopkins.
An ancient form of punishment captured in a very modern way. Raif Badawi's apparent flogging, filmed on a smartphone. His guards whipped him in public, but told onlookers to put their phones away. Badawi is paying a heavy price for his beliefs. Editor of the secular Free Saudi Liberals website, he was accused of insulting Islam. His punishment? 10 years jail and 1,000 lashes over 20 weeks. He'll get 50 more tomorrow. The footage of him being flogged is all his wife and 3 children have seen of him in 2 years.
I cannot fully explain the amount of suffering we're going through. Every child needs his father, and every wife needs her husband. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of questions. I ask myself, how long will we be bearing this? How long can we deal with this nightmare?
To Western eyes, his writings may seem idealistic, a little naive. There is criticism of Saudi clerics, support for the Egyptian revolution. And underneath it all, underlying this, just a sense of hope that society might change. In one extract, he says, "For me, liberalism simply means live and let live. This is a splendid slogan." But then he takes the clerics to task. They have succeeded in planting hostility to liberalism in the minds of the public and turning people against it, lest the carpet be pulled out from under their feet. But their hold over people's minds and society shall vanish like dust carried off in the wind. For some in Saudi Arabia, this was beyond the pale. For others, the presence of the Saudi ambassador at the Paris march last weekend was far more offensive. But the West faces accusations of hypocrisy too.
It's very hard to justify a global manhunt against al-Qaeda because of their violent attacks against journalists. When not only do these governments say little when Saudi Arabia carries out these very similar abuses, but invites them to participate as an ally against ISIS's abuses.
Money talks, but sometimes it buys a degree of silence too. British arms firms rely on Saudi's billions, so ministers have to be pragmatic.
I think it is probably a reasonable assertion that the UK hasn't had a great appetite for tangling with Saudi Arabia over human rights issues precisely because of the importance that we have placed upon them as an ally and trading partner.
There's another reason why Downing Street won't want to rock the boat. The Saudis want Britain to ban the Muslim Brotherhood movement from operating in Britain and urge David Cameron to commission an inquiry into the Islamist group. But it seems the Finnish report disagrees with the Saudi view. The report has been knocking around Whitehall for about 7 months now, while officials decide how best to break the news to Riyadh. Downing Street came up with an idea. They thought they should slip out the report just before Christmas in the hope that nobody would notice. But the Foreign Office was furious. Diplomats said you simply cannot deal with this subject in that way. And now nobody in Westminster knows quite what to do with it. Ensaf Haidar is now exiled in Canada. She's desperate to see her husband.
Raif is a very peaceful and very respectable man in everything he says and writes. There is nothing to prove that he has insulted religion or attacked the government in any way. Why should he take such penalty that he surely does not deserve? All I can say is that I hope he will get his freedom soon.
العقاب ده عقاب ما يستحقه.
That's unlikely. The hard reality is that Saudi Arabia doesn't like criticism from any quarter and has no reason to listen to it either.
Nick Hopkins, well, I'm joined now by Zaid Belbagi, a Gulf Affairs expert who has a wide range of experience with the Saudi government, Madawi al-Rashid, professor at the Middle East Centre, the London School of Economics, and from Washington, Ali Al-Ahmed from the Gulf Institute, who knows Raif Badawi. Good evening to you all. First of all, Ali Al-Ahmed, you know the family, and I understand that Raif's wife is very concerned as to whether he would survive 1,000 lashes.
I think that's very reasonable. When you are beaten 1,000 times by a stick like this, it's very strong, and I tried it on one of your producers and very slightly, and he complained of pain. So if you use this switch here 1,000 times on somebody's body for 20 weeks, consecutive 20 weeks, I think you can develop infections, and that might lead to death, especially in the environment of Saudi prisons, which are horrendously unhealthy. And we have had many deaths in custody in Saudi Arabia, and also other permanent damages to prisoners. So yes, there is a very dangerous...
That cane you had, is that the kind of cane that is used?
Yes, we procured it. Actually, we got this from Saudi Arabia, from the same source where the Saudi government uses these canes. And I said it's very flexible and it's very strong, and you can use it. You know, it's very painful. I tried it at my staff, and you know, I tried it myself. So it's very, very painful.
Well, let me just put that to people in the studio. Zaid Belbagi, the vast majority of people would think that floggings of this nature, 1,000 lashes, were completely indefensible. How do you defend it?
I don't defend it per se, and thank you, Kirsty, for having me here. My comments are with regards to Mr. Badawi in general and his record on the internet. I'm not sure that his views represent those of the majority of Saudis.
But before we come on to talk about that, 1,000 lashes is incredibly extreme. It's most unusual, isn't it, for 1,000 lashes? Why do you think the Saudi regime felt necessary to hand out 1,000 lashes, 50 lashes a week, over 20 weeks?
With regards lashes, this is prescribed under Saudi Arabia's legal code, and as you know, Saudi Arabia is a Muslim country, and its legal system is based on the Sharia law.
Do you think that the Saudis know or indeed care if people outside Saudi Arabia find this so horrific?
I think there are many people in Riyadh who are acutely aware of the implications, and it would be complete folly to think that nothing's going on in terms of back-channel diplomacy vis-à-vis this kind of thing. The West works very close with the Saudi government.
Well, we'll go on to talk about what Nick Hopkins was saying was the reasons why perhaps Britain doesn't go even further in condemning it. But Professor Al-Rashid, I mean, please tell me, why do you think the Saudi government was so keen to hand out this level of punishment to a blogger?
I think the Saudi regime is going through a critical moment. There is a problem over succession. The king is in hospital. It is very unclear who is going to become king soon. The second problem is Saudi Arabia lives in a region that is full of hostile forces that are trying to assert their Islamic credentials. So Saudi Arabia is actually participating in the international alliance against IS, yes, the Islamic State in Iraq, which antagonizes certain conservative elements in Saudi society. And these lashes demonstrate, since they are done in public, it's like a theatrical performance to show the Saudis that the Saudi Arabia is applying its interpretation of Islam rather than Islam itself. Because within Islam, there are multiple schools of Islamic jurisprudence, and the Saudi regime applies the strictest because it tries to appease these conservative elements, mainly the Wahhabi establishment, and the judges belong to this establishment.
But Zaid Belbagi, presumably you do see the hypocrisy in the fact that the Saudi government is represented at the march following the massacre at Charlie Hebdo, and yet for someone who's blogging about and criticising, and to hear his wife, she says that she doesn't actually criticise religion, that he faces such a horrific sentence. I mean, there's a huge hypocrisy in that, isn't there? I mean, it's a joke.
To some, perhaps, moving though the video is, there is a record online, and it's been published in The Guardian, of Mr. Badawi's anti-religious remarks. And in terms of hypocrisy, I mean, there were a huge number of people there whose representation was questionable. I think at the head of them, Benjamin Netanyahu, of which there was uproar about.
Ali Ahmed, coming back to you in Washington, if you were to imagine a crime similar to the crime that has been perpetrated by Raif Badawi, what would be a kind of equivalent crime in the West, do you think?
I don't understand the question, well, really. I don't see any crime in the West that will...
Yes, I was going to say a criticism, such as a strong level of criticism, because this is all about, in the last 10 days, we've been talking about the levels and nature and limits to free speech. You know, what kind of crime do you think he did commit? Because he was critical of the religious police. He must have known he was taking a risk.
I think he was critical, but his criticism was not very severe. In fact, that he was praising the government itself. So one thing I want to address here is the Sharia business, that Saudi Arabia does not apply Sharia. In the Islamic history, there is not a single school or judge that have ever, since the Prophet Muhammad time, has issued a judgment of 1,000 lashes. This is Saudi innovation. There is no 1,000 lashes in Islam. Secondly, Sharia in Islam forbids monarchy, absolute monarchy. So this is very insulting to use Islam as a barrier, as a shield. This is not Islam.
But do you feel, in a sense, frustrated that although the US and Britain and other countries in the West have criticised Saudi Arabia for this, you know, as Professor Al-Rashid is saying, the problem is that there are other considerations at play here, and it's all about, you know, dealing with IS, and that really takes precedence in terms of how they critique Saudi Arabia, not only dealing with IS, but business ties as well.
I think I agree with Dr. Rashid. There is a domestic policy here at play for the Saudis. Secondly, regarding to the Western governments, they, before even IS showed up, they had no interest in pushing the Saudis for human rights. No single Western government has called on Saudi Arabia to become the constitutional monarchy, for example, or to allow women to drive. Statements are empty unless there is action. That's why Canada, for example, where they express concern, but they sell armored vehicles for the same body that has carried out these flogging. So without real actions, these statements have no impact.
But do you think it's realistic or indeed fair for the West to judge Saudi Arabia by the West standards?
Well, there are two things here. First, when we talk about the lashing, and what we are witnessing here is an attempt by the Saudi regime to posit this as an Islamic ruling. But this is not an excuse, because as Ali Ahmed said...
we have so little time, I do want to ask you, do you see a hardening of the... Are there other examples, do you think, of a hardening?
In these kind of matters, there is no legal relativism. Torturing a prisoner by lashing him is condemned by international law. And therefore, to hide behind the veneer of an Islamic or Sharia ruling is not actually accurate, because in Islam itself, this kind of judgment, this kind of punishment has never been practiced throughout Islamic history. 1,000 lashes is excessive, and it hasn't been done before. And therefore, we have to ask ourselves, why is the Saudi regime going through that road? And it's not only about lashing, it's about public executions. Saudi Arabia, since the beginning of 2005, has carried out 9 executions in public squares, the last of which was taking place just on Sunday, when a woman who was accused and the court judged her as guilty killed her stepdaughter. And the Saudis dragged this woman into the street with the help of the religious police and executed her in public. So this is the 9th one in 2 weeks. So we could imagine what will happen at the end of 2015. And there is one point. Many people don't actually know what the crime of Raif Badawi is. Raif Badawi was critical of religious scholars and the religious police. And in Islam, there is no clergy that is sacred. And therefore, these people are human beings that are fallible and can be criticized. Whereas the sacred is about God, is about the Prophet.
Thank you,
and he has